So here we are, standing at the edge of the abyss, peering into the question of free will. Imagine it, all these paths stretching out before you, each shimmering with possibility. Seems like you're the decider, right? You're in the driver's seat, captain of your own ship. But what if that feeling of control is the ultimate illusion? What if your choices aren't really yours at all? Let's tumble down this rabbit hole together. If you're new here, I'm Dennis, and I like to explore everyday things with a curious mind. I'm creating these videos for my daughter, hoping they'll be useful to her someday and perhaps to others as well. Now, before we begin, forget dusty textbooks and the intellectual wrestling matches for a moment. Let's just play with the idea and do a little thought experiment, a journey into the heart of everyday assumptions. We've all heard that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so let's paint one with the mundane object of a door. But what do I mean by free will in this little exploration? It's the notion that you, as a unique individual you, can actually make choices all on your own. You're faced with a series of doors placed in front of you and you decide the path. And you feel, deep down, that you generally have the power to choose any one of them. So picture all these doors. If we had this absolute complete free will, it would be as if we stood before an infinite expanse of doors. Every single possibility, every conceivable path spread out before us like a buffet for our mind. But let's examine some fundamental truth to see how well the idea of absolute free will really holds up, starting with the big picture and gradually zooming in into the smaller details. There are certain things, certain facts that we all seem to agree on. The basic laws of physics, for instance. I can't simply wish delicious Italian pizza into existence right before my eyes. And as much as I might enjoy the idea, I can't also suddenly decide to go soaring through the space like some kind of a cosmic superhero, because that would be too cool. These laws, like gravity, the very nature of matter, they begin to limit our options. The initial infinite number of doors is already dwindling down to a finite number. Let's say for the sake of our little thought experiment that it goes to, I don't know, several millions of doors. Still plenty left, but there's a very big jump already. Adding to that, there's also the notion of time. Imagine being born 1,000 years ago. The options open to you would be totally different. I couldn't just whip out my phone to Google something. I would probably be a lot skinnier if I had to run away from predators on a regular basis and scavenge for food. All that to say that you didn't get to pick your arrival date. You were just dropped into a timeline, and that timeline sets the scene. But the main thing is time, something completely out of your control, shrinks down the paths or doors that you can take. Building on this and still playing within the realm of, well, let's call it reality, we don't choose where we're born. We simply arrive, products of our parents' genes and locations. And as we all know, where you're born dramatically changes the choices you have. Someone born in a rural village or in a bustling metropolis, or one continent versus another, their lives unfold along very, very different paths. So from the grand scale of the universe and the constraints it imposes, we see that our choices, amount of doors are narrowing. Bit by bit, we see that infinite number diminishing. We started with infinity to a finite number. And now for the sake of a little mental game, let's say that the number's down, to a couple 100,000 doors. The numbers, of course, are completely arbitrary, but the core idea, I hope, resonates. Shifting our focus from cosmic forces closer to home, what about the environments that mold us from the very beginning? Let's consider the family. You didn't choose your family, and it didn't choose you. There's a famous story in the 1950s Japan where two families, one wealthy, had one children, and then a poor family also had the children at the same time at the same hospital. Somehow, the babies were switched. Fast forward 60 years, the child raised by the rich family became successful company head, while the child raised by the poor family struggled. It's a rather stark illustration, isn't it? Our family, our upbringing shapes us and the options available to us far more than we might like to admit. And let's zoom in further. I'm talking about those life experiences, those moments, those interactions that, like tiny drops of water, eventually carve out a path in the landscape of who we are. Consider our own bodies and genes, elements largely beyond our control. Would someone considered conventionally good-looking encounter the same opportunities as someone deemed less so? A person perceived as beautiful often receives smiles, help, and experiences a world that seems a lot more open. In contrast, someone seen as less conventionally attractive might face invisibility and fewer opportunities. These built-in traits, these bodies we didn't choose, subtly shape our interactions and consequently the doors we perceive as open or closed before us. Have you ever considered that your appearance changed the doors available to you and potentially how you chose which door to go through? And we can also think about our childhood. Think about the things your parents said to you, as well as the things they didn't say. The rules they set, the expectations they had, the way they reacted to the world. These aren't grand, sweeping forces like gravity or time, but they're forces nonetheless. They shape our habits, our beliefs, our knee-jerk reactions to the world around us. For instance, I remember growing up, particular teaching, you might call it. The idea was that whatever happened, we should avoid disrupting others, strive for a kind of invisibility. It shaped so many things in my life. Even now, I often find myself having to consciously fight against the ingrained tendency to restrain myself and to hold back. It's a subtle thing, but it's there. It's a door that was in a way already chosen for me. We can also take something as basic as food. The tastes and textures we knew as kids, how meals were eaten, family style or alone, and even what was talked about and not talked about at dinner can really shape what we like, what we prefer, and even how we feel about topics for the rest of our lives. But food's impact does go further, changing our bodies and therefore what choices we think we have. What we eat changes our brain chemistry, affecting our mood, how well we think, and even if we're more likely to have certain mental health issues. This greatly affects our everyday choices, not only for food, but also how we deal with people. I'm sure you've caught yourself and others being hangry, for example. Think about it. If your gut is controlling your mood and thinking, how much real choice do you have in what you eat or how you react to stress, let's say? In a situation where food is scarce, you will most likely not make decisions you are doing right now. So now I imagine you're still with me in the whole argument. In these discussions, most people tend to agree, at least to this point. Moving from an infinity to a much smaller, more graspable number, that's the easy part. But let's go even deeper. To further illustrate it, let's go through a couple more scientific examples. The field of psychology largely operates on the principle of cause and effect. A difficult childhood, for example, can create lasting traumas that demonstrably alter brain development and behavior. These traumas, in turn, can predispose individuals to certain choices and reactions later in life, effectively predetermining a range of options and severely limiting the scope of what we perceive as free will. To illustrate how deeply ingrained these influences can be, consider the extreme and tragic case of Charles Whitman, the Texas Tower sniper. Back in the 1960s, Whitman, a former US Marine, murdered his wife and mother before unleashing a deadly barrage of gunfire, killing many and wounding many more. Now, disturbingly, before the incident, he wrote the following: "I do not really understand myself these days. I am supposed to be an average, reasonable, and intelligent man. However, lately, I've been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts. After my death, I wish that an autopsy would be performed on me to see if there are any invisible physical disorder." And indeed, after his death, an autopsy revealed a tumor pressing against his amygdala, the brain region associated with emotions, aggressions, and impulse control. This sparked a huge debate. If a physical abnormality like a tumor can so dramatically impact the behavior, to what extent were Whitman's actions a product of his own free will? Did the tumor impair his ability to make rational choices and to control his impulses? This example, while extreme, highlights the potential for unseen factors to influence our actions. And building on this idea of hidden influences, let's bring it down to the micro level and consider the very act of making a decision. A fascinating experiment by Benjamin Libet offers some compelling insights. In the 1980s, he used a brain scanning equipment to monitor participants as they performed a simple task: flicking their wrist. The truly mind-bending discovery was that the brain activity associated with the flick of the wrist started a fraction of a second before the person consciously decided to move. So what does this imply? It suggests that our conscious decisions might not be the clear starting point we assume. Our thoughts, emotions, and feelings often bubble up from somewhere hidden corner of our mind. They simply appear. Think about it. Have you ever had a random memory pop into your head out of nowhere? Or suddenly think someone looks like your old neighbor? You didn't consciously choose those thoughts. They just kind of arose. They're like your heartbeat, your breathing, or the intricate process of digestion. Things that happen automatically behind the scene. You can't just will yourself to digest food better, can you? It just happens. This experiment challenges the very notion of where our decisions and our thoughts originate, suggesting that unconscious processes might be driving our actions before we're even aware of them, further limiting the scope of our conscious free will. It's interesting to me that people generally agree with all the points I've mentioned. They accept the idea that we don't have an infinite number of choices, readily going from infinity to millions, a massive reduction. They're also okay with going from millions to thousands and often even down to a handful. And that's a huge drop. And it seems reasonable. Yet, when we go from a handful to just one, a tiny drop in comparison, that's when it becomes unimaginable. It's strange how we tend to resist the final smallest step. As an engineer, I naturally gravitate towards thinking of the brain as a system and decision-making as a complex equation. And I imagine an equation so vast with so many variables representing our genes, experiences, and our environment that it stretches beyond human comprehension. We might not be able to solve it now or ever, but the equation could potentially exist nonetheless. Think of how we once attributed thunder to angry gods, only to later understand it through the science of atmospheric physics. Civilizations used plants for healing for centuries without understanding the underlying biochemistry. More recently, we've had an uproar of AI systems able to fully mimic human interactions through billions of variables that we can't even fully understand. Just as the workings of AI or herbal remedies were once mysterious, I suspect the equation governing our brain is simply beyond our current ability to fully decode. The fact that we don't fully grasp it doesn't negate its existence though. It simply highlights the limitations of our current understanding. And if our decisions are, in fact, the output of such a complex equation, how much room does that really leave for what we call free will? So to push that thought a bit further, consider this. If, in the end, you're left with a single door to choose from, or perhaps a handful, as you might not fully be convinced yet, it does not matter, as the real twist is that you didn't even get to choose which doors those final doors and options would be. The doors are imposed on you, leading me to think, how meaningful is the whole question of free will in the first place? Isn't the real question not how much free will we have, but whether, given such limited options, that is even a question worth asking? Now, I realize this idea can be unsettling. It changes some of our deepest beliefs. Some might even ask, what's the point? But I believe there are some profound benefits to be found in this understanding. And before we part ways for now, I want to offer this as it helped me take a breath on something that was quite complicated. Whatever burdens you carry, whatever weighs on you in the quiet of the night or in the moments of solitude, the idea that there is no free will, at least far less than we might think, can offer some kind of release. It's not all on you. You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose your birthplace, your circumstances, your initial starting points. So how much of that weight you carry is truly solely your fault? This understanding can lead to unexpected places. It can offer a new perspective on yourself and others. It begs the question, what's the point? The point is, I find it extremely liberating. It fosters empathy, understanding, and patience, both for ourselves and for those around us. It allows us to release the burden of total responsibility, acknowledging that so much of what shapes us is beyond our control. Imagine a world where we judge less and understand more, where compassion replaces frustration. That world, I believe, is within our reach, and it begins with acknowledging the forces that shape us all. This isn't just a philosophical exercise, it's a pathway to a more connected, empathetic existence. And while this is just the beginning of the exploration on the topic, in my next videos we'll delve even deeper, exploring how this understanding can change the way you live your life, fostering these qualities and unlocking the potential you never knew you had. So let's embrace this paradox. We may not be entirely free in the traditional sense, but understanding the forces that empower us to navigate our limited choices with greater awareness and compassion. It's not about surrendering to determinism, but about finding freedom within the framework of our own constraints. And this newfound perspective allows us to be kinder to ourselves and more understanding of others, fostering a world built on empathy rather than judgment. And ultimately, that's a world worth striving for. Join me the next time as we continue to explore the implications of this fascinating idea. Thanks for watching.